I lived in Mongolia for 2 years, and it was fascinating. Everything about life there was patently different from the way I grew up in America. And in a way, I never fully understood my own culture until I stepped outside of it and experienced another one to compare it with. An aspect that really struck me were the homes. About half of Mongolia's population live in these rectangular Soviet-era apartment blocks, while much of the other half lives in traditional yurts made of felt and wooden lattice. It's a vestige of the country's nomadic past. I realized the homes we live in shape nearly every aspect of our lives. Someone living in a suburban American home with 2 cars in the garage organizes life very differently than someone living in a yurt. Our homes are more than buildings. They truly shape how we live. That realization stayed with me long after I returned home. It eventually led me to a historical question that became the foundation for my dissertation. Why did homeownership become such a powerful institution in post-war America, and why does it seem to function so differently today? My dissertation is called When Housing Worked: Consumer Finance, Housing Policy, and the Institution of American Homeownership. And it argues that post-World War II homeownership was not simply a housing market. It functioned as an institution. It was the combination of federal housing policy, mortgage finance, private developers, stable employment, and American families, which all reinforced one another to produce stable, home-owning households for decades. My research asks why that institutional arrangement, for a time, worked so well, why it eventually changed, and what that transformation can teach us about the history of modern America. To answer those questions, I engage with several important works that cover this arc in our history. The foundation begins with Kenneth Jackson's Crabgrass Frontier and Marc Weiss's book, The Rise of the Community Builders. Jackson demonstrated how federal policy made post-war suburbanization possible, while Weiss showed how large-scale private developers translated those policies into thousands of new communities across the country. My dissertation confirms those interpretations, but extends them by asking a different question. Rather than focusing primarily on how the system was built, I ask why that successful institutional arrangement ultimately changed. I also view developers within a much broader institutional framework, showing how they operated alongside federal agencies, lenders, labor markets, and municipal governments rather than as isolated actors. To understand the families the system was designed to serve, I turned to Lizabeth Cohen's A Consumer's Republic. Cohen argues that post-war consumer culture made the households the center of American economic and political life. I build on that insight by shifting attention to the financial institutions that made our consumer society possible. Rather than focusing on consumption itself, I ask how mortgage finance and home ownership supported that vision of middle-class life for decades before ultimately giving way to a system built on expanding household credit. To explain that transformation, I engage with Greta Krippner's Capitalizing on Crisis, in addition to Levitin and Wachter's book, The Great American Housing Bubble. Krippner demonstrates how financialization of the American economy emerged from the policy responses to several inflation crises of the 1970s, while Levitin and Wachter dive deeper into the institutional failures that caused the housing collapse in 2008. My dissertation connects those two interpretations by tracing the evolution of housing finance across the entire post-war period. Instead of treating the financial crisis as an isolated event, I argue that it was a culmination of the gradual changes to those institutions that had once made American homeownership so stable. Ultimately, I believe my dissertation contributes something new to the historiography because it changes the unit of analysis. Much of the existing scholarship examines individual moments like the rise of suburbia, the emergence of consumer culture, the financialization of the economy, or the housing crash. My research instead follows the arc of a single institution across more than 6 decades. By bringing together economic, political, and social history, I can present the full narrative of American homeownership as an institution from 1945 to 2008. When I lived in Mongolia, I came to appreciate that homes reflect the societies that built them. This dissertation has convinced me of something even deeper. If we want to understand a society, we must go beyond the houses people live in. We have to understand the institutions that made those homes and the families living in them possible. Thank you for taking the time to watch my video. I would appreciate any feedback that you have for me regarding this project.